Tom Carper tells a story that when he first ran for state office, he saw an opportunity that no one else wanted. This year, a lot of people are interested in what Tom Carper has, one of Delaware's seats in the U.S. Senate. One of those interested people is Alex Pires. He's running as an independent, and he joins us as first person this week. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
We have a tradition here on First that the first question is sort of your 30-second pitch, your elevator pitch, if it were, to voters. Why should you be Delaware's next senator?
30 seconds. I think Delaware is the most corrupt state in the Union. There's a lot of ratings that come out about corruption, and Delaware is usually in the top 3 or 4, but I always make the joke that Delaware would be number 1, but they paid someone off to be 3rd or 4th. Delaware is obviously run by big corporations, and they, over a period of time, really kind of buy their influence. I think Tom Carper originally was probably a pretty decent legislator and a pretty decent guy, but that was 25, 30 years ago, and as time has gone by, he's just gotten more and more money from the big banks, the big corporations, and he's become part of the problem. For example, he took $760,000 alone just from the 4 big banks. You can't tell me you can take $750,000 and not adhere to what they want. So it's that issue, the corruption, and secondly, I don't think the founding fathers really, Mark, ever wanted what we now have, people who don't work ever and just run for office as a full-time job. Mr. Carper's never worked a day in his life in private sector. I think that's wrong. I think you want a government where people take turns. People from the private sector come in, run for 2 years or 4 years, and then we take turns. That's what I am. I'm from the private sector. I've never run for federal office. I only want to run for 1 term. I don't want the pay, I don't want the pension, I don't want those side benefits. I just want to do a good job, and then at the end of 6 years, pass the baton to somebody else, preferably a woman, preferably a minority, preferably somebody younger. I think we need fresh faces in Delaware.
You're running as an independent. Mm-hmm. Where do you line up ideologically? Do you agree with the Republicans on some things, the Democrats on some things? Mm-hmm. What are those things?
Yeah. Let's talk about money and fiscal policies. I'm very, very conservative, and that's because I run businesses. I have 8 businesses here in Delaware. I founded and I run a bank. That's all about being conservative and frugal. I have a very successful bank, Community Bank Delaware, that I started 6 years ago. And then I have a law practice with my wife, and we take on high-risk cases that involve investing a lot of money on behalf of really the forgotten people in society, and you've got to be pretty good with your money in order to survive, and that class action work is the riskiest. So I'm very good at money management, and I'm very conservative when it comes to money. When it comes to people, though, and families, that's the real purpose of government. The real purpose of government is to take care of families, not corporations. I think Mr. Carper has it wrong. I'm interested in children, programs for children, the elderly, the sick, the forgotten and the abused. I'm interested in autism, and I'm interested in cancer, and I'm interested in our veterans. I feel very strongly about their programs. The Veterans Administration needs a lot of work. So when it comes to families, I'm much, much more liberal than I am when it comes to money and fiscal policy, where I'm very conservative.
So the economy, obviously, number one on everybody's mind. Would you have voted for something like the stimulus plan? Would you have voted for health care reform, Obamacare, as people call it?
Well, there's 2 different issues. The country has gone through its worst economic spell, really, in 50, 60 years. And some people say, in 80 years since the heart of the Deep Depression. It needed a stimulus. It needed everything we could come up with. What I disagreed with is I don't think we should have invested so much money in the big banks and not gotten anything for the taxpayer, for the citizen, for the working class person. I think we bailed them out to the tune of around $800 billion, and what did the taxpayer get? What did the working man and woman get? They got nothing. They actually got snubbed. I thought that was a mistake. I thought that should have been done better. But the country was in trouble, and I admit that, and I admit that they were frightened. They were very frightened, and I think they overreacted a little bit by throwing money at the banks when they. I'm a banker, and it's not just this bank that I've run, but I was the president of the Department of Justice Credit Union, and on the board for 8 years, so I know the credit union world too. So I know a little bit about banking. I've had 14 years of experience, and I think that what we did, throwing money at Bank of America, was a mistake.
What about healthcare?
Healthcare is more complex. I have a little bit different view than the Republicans and the Democrats. They yell at each other all day long. They just sit there like two pit bulls, and Obama makes fun of Romney, and Romney makes fun of Obama. But if you look at the two programs, Obamacare and Romneycare, they're actually very similar. My two sisters, two of my three sisters, and my brother live in Massachusetts, and they're under Romneycare, so I hear about it all the time. It actually works quite well. Obamacare, though, the parts that have been in place are actually working quite well, too. I think the pre-existing condition requirement is something that everybody's waited for. I have almost 400 employees. I have a lot of employees that's important to them because they do have pre-existing conditions. Most people actually do. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest secret in people's lives. They do have little problems with their health, and they're afraid to fill out the forms and be honest. We encouraged our people to be dishonest when they filled out their forms for health care. That's wrong. The other thing I believe is we take the best of Obamacare, we take the best of Romneycare, and most importantly, we take care of everybody who needs health care, which is everyone. Right? So I just came from a session with the Cesar Rodney Institute. There was a group of people there that I met with to talk about healthcare and their best ideas from their experience in Delaware. So I want to bring together both sides and stop people from yelling and have them care a little bit more about our people. Speaking
of health, you've made Senator Carper's health somewhat of an issue in this campaign. Why is that? Why do you think that's important?
It is an issue. When he ran 12 years ago against Senator Roth, who was a loved man, I mean, people can't even tell you today whether he was a Republican or Democrat. People didn't care. They really loved him. I liked him myself. His health was fading. Mr. Carper made it an issue and kept saying, you know, he's lost a step, you know, you need someone with a little bit more vitality, and all these references to his health, which I thought was a little rough. And lo and behold, 12 years later, you know, it's come back to bite him. He's in very poor health. If you spend any time with him, you'll notice that he takes a lot of medicine. I don't think he's allowed to drive a car anymore. He has, I believe, both Parkinson's and some other form of emotional problem. And we were at debate the other night, and right in the middle of the debate, he said, "What was the question again?" And then in another question, he stopped, and he seemed to have lost himself. It's very sad, but it's not fair to not release your medical records. In Delaware, if you're a policeman, you have to take a physical, and it has to be revealed. Fireman, school teacher, truck driver, I mean, tell me, you know, a nurse, a doctor, everybody has to take physicals. I have to take physicals. I just released mine the day after I announced. I put my physical up on the web, and hundreds of people have seen it, and it's got blemishes in it. You know, one of the comments my doctor made was, you know, I'm in great physical condition, but I wish you would drink a little less because I love wine. And I think people need to know that this is a 6-year job. Obviously, what I'm concerned about is this. The rumor in Delaware is that he's trying to hold on to the seat for the Democrats, and then he's going to step down in March and April. And then people in Delaware will not have picked the senator. Mr. Markell will pick the senator. I just think that's wrong, Mark. I think it's wrong. I'm not trying to lecture people about health. I'm trying to say we should have a fair election. If Mr. Carper won't release his records because he's afraid that people will see that he's not going to make it through the 6 years, he should either step down or he should, you know, at least let us examine it to see how unhealthy he is.
But you don't know, you don't have any kind of independent sort of,
I have
that
eyes.
He does have Parkinson's, that
I have
any of
eyes.
that.
If someone's hands shake, repeatedly. That's Parkinson's. Right? You don't have to be, have a PhD in the field of medicine.
Because there's people that see him, we've heard this, and then people say, well, I see him at the Y, he's working out, he looks
different.
like he's in good shape.
That's a different, no, well, he's not in good shape. First of all, there are side effects from Parkinson's. I don't want to play the part of a doctor here. Look, it's one thing to be able to walk down the street briskly or whatever workout he's doing, that's fine. I'm talking about here, your ability to weigh serious matters and articulate them. Look, if he's so well, why didn't the Democratic Party let him speak at the convention? If he's so powerful in the Democratic Party, they didn't want any part of him at the convention. They never let him speak. Why? Because they were afraid that he'll have a lapse. It's sad for me to have to talk about that. Why do I have to talk about his health? Because I feel there's dishonesty within the Democratic Party. They don't want that to come out because they're afraid they'll lose their seat. It's not their seat. When did it become the Democratic Party's seat? It's not their seat. It's owned by the people of Delaware. I think one of the reasons I'm doing so well in this campaign is the more people see Carper, the more they see him with his lapses, they begin to say, gee, is he really going to stick around for 6 years? I feel this way. He has no intention of staying more than 3 or 4 months at the most. And I think that becomes unfair to the 900,000 people living in the state. I'm not saying you have to vote for me. I'm saying you should be able to vote for the person who's going to do the job. There is obviously differences of opinion. I think it's ironic that what happened to Senator Roth is happening to Senator Carper. The health issue is becoming an important issue. But why don't you have him on this show, and why don't you have him talk about his health, and you'll find that he won't answer it. He does the same thing. I go to the Y and I run around and I go on a treadmill. I mean, what does that mean? Ask him if he's allowed to drive a car. Ask him if he's allowed to disclose all the medicine that he takes. He almost fell asleep at this debate, and I'm not being mean. I'm a very straightforward, considerate, thoughtful person. I don't want a senator who can't stay awake. I mean, he was in a daze. I also think he has a little bit of partial paralysis in his face. And that's not his fault. So people are going to watch this show and say, gee, Al, you're kind of mean. I'm trying to be honest about what's going on, which is the people of Delaware, I believe, should pick the candidate, Mark.
All right, and obviously it's a very expensive thing to run a campaign, even in a small state like Delaware.
Very expensive.
We've seen the billboards you have up on I-95. Those, I'm sure, aren't cheap. Talk about your contributors and sort of how you're financing your campaign.
I really don't have very many contributors. I mean, look, I have a very successful group of businesses in Delaware. I have a very successful bank. And I have a very, very successful law practice. And I've made a lot of money, and I don't deny that. I've invested all of it in Delaware. My wife and I love Delaware. We live full-time in Dewey Beach. When I decided to run, I thought, put your money where your mouth is. And so I've been paying for it myself. Only recently did I start accepting contributions from people. And I have some rules. I don't take money from corporations. I don't take money from anybody associated with the big banks or DuPont or any of the big. I don't want that kind of money. If there's an everyday person who wants to send me $50 or $100, that would be fine. But I've been paying for it myself. So I've spent on billboards probably a little over $100,000 in billboards, and there's 18 new ones that are coming up next week. I have more billboards than Mr. Carper and Mr. Wade, who's also running combined. My television commercials are on this week. I think there's 168 this week on Comcast alone, and there's probably 30 or 40 on the downstate station, WBOC. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Sure.
And then next week it picks up, and I'm doing literally hundreds of thousands of dollars of the TV commercials. But they're different TV commercials, Mark. They're not the traditional type that people see. I don't sit there and say, hey, I can make a lot of jobs for people and all that BS. I don't believe in any of that. My commercials are very straightforward, talking to people about the limited things that a politician can do. I think people need to bring their expectations down and realize you're electing an everyday person from your neighborhood. We're not supermen. We're just everyday citizens trying to make fair decisions. And if I can make fair decisions, maybe the country will improve.
For years, there have been photo ops around Delaware. Mike Castle, Tom Carper, together, sort of doing different things
Right.
with federal investment into the state. Would you be able to get along with whoever else is in office, with Governor Markell, and work together? Is that something you would do?
I don't have any secrets. Governor Markell's been to my house. I supported him. Why? Because he's a good business person, to be really honest. I invited him to my house. I raised money for him when he ran. I like him. I think he's a business person who happens to be governor. He's only got 2 terms, and I'm hoping this term, if he gets reelected, he won't be running around chasing money, and he'll just do the right thing. That's the good thing about term limits, by the way. There's no sense in trying to buy somebody if there's term limits, because by the time he gets to his second term, he's not interested. He's interested in his legacy. So I think he's going to be a good governor the second time around. So I support him. For example, I don't support Mr. Den, who's a Democrat. I support Cher Valenzuela. Why? She's a businesswoman, and we need women. I don't like white men running around telling women what to do. I think it's backward. Women are smarter than men. I believe that. My companies are run by women, and that's why I'm so rich. So when people say, how do you feel about women? I say, they made me wealthy. My bank's run by a woman. My companies are run by women. My law practice is run by my wife. I mean, she's 3 times smarter than I am. So my success is attributed to women, and I don't want to live in a state in which it's all white men. I mean, you're laughing, but I feel that way. The governor's white. The lieutenant governor's white. The senator's white. The other senator's white. The congressman's wife. The leader of the House is white, male. The leader of the Senate, it's 7 white men running around in circles talking about women's issues. I think it's backward. I'm a big supporter of Cher Valenzuela. I think she'd be a great lieutenant governor. And I like the fact that we'd have a Democrat as a governor and a Republican as a lieutenant governor, and women would be able to see a woman leader. I mean, are we going to talk about women's bodies by asking a man? What is this? I mean, I think it's wrong. So I can get along with anybody. But I can particularly do well with women because I grew up with 3 sisters, and they ran the show along with my mother, and I respected them, and they've all become very successful. My sisters are teachers, and so I'm into that.
All right. We will be following this race very closely. Alex Pires, thank you very much for being here. You can